Welcome, everybody, to Event Marketing Redefined. It's awesome to have you all here. Thank you, as always, for taking time out of your day to come talk shop. I have a cool guest today. I have David Fischette. He is the CEO, founder, chief creative at Go West Creative. They are a content and event production agency. They've done some super cool work. You can look them up. David, thank you for showing up, man. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Matt, thanks so much. Appreciate you having me here.
All right, so let's roll into this. Give me, as brief as you can, just give us your background, right? Tell us exactly, how you got into this racket and kind of what you do.
I grew up in Southern California, and I was a musician back in the day, a fair musician. I would not say good musician. And I had a band all through high school. And then when I was in early college years, that band got a financial backer who bought us a big old sound system, which sat in my parents' garage where I lived. But he also paid for all of our rehearsal studios, which had sound systems, and every nightclub we played at had a sound system in it. So this big PA that we got him to buy us just sat in my parents' garage. And so I got the idea in November of 1984, kids, a long time ago, before many of you were born. I got the idea to buy a couple of turntables and start a mobile DJ company. And that's how we started in 1984 as Audio Ecstasy.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a name.
Yeah, no, yeah, especially having that name during the 90s when those late night 800 numbers were so popular, right? Yeah, people would call, if I was at the office after 10 o'clock, I'd get all kinds of calls. People wanted to talk to someone.
Awesome.
Anyway, but through high school and college, I was a theater guy. And so taking the mix of music and theater and bringing that into experience has kind of been the true north of really everything that we do at Go West.
Awesome, man. I just want to set up our conversation a little bit today, right? Because we're going to try to frame this conversation around content. I really love this conversation. And I believe that content is king, especially now, but essentially like story, narrative, messaging, these elements are so vital to successful companies, successful marketing, successful events, experiences, everything. Content to me really conveys and moves people, right? And obviously conveying and moving is what gets people to buy, what gets people to be loyal, what gets people to shift mindset, which is all the things that typically a company brand and marketing is trying to do, which I think really sets up this conversation for us, your background in content specifically and what you all do at Go West. So tell me, why do you think creating great content is crucial for a business or a brand?
Yeah, it's the lifeblood. We're in a little bit different side of the business than you are, right? And your world is big trade show stuff, and our world is pretty much the lion's share of our revenue is that business meeting inside the room, right? And a lot of those programs, let's face it, clients are paying $250,000, $500,000, $1 million, $3 million, $5 million for these big productions. But it's the content, which is not the largest piece of those budgets, but that's the stickiness to the relationships. That's the stickiness to their relationship with their stakeholders, the people that are in their audience. So we always say that when we get the opportunity to bid on shows that are $500,000 to $5 million shows or even larger, we understand that excellence, flawless execution in the audio, the video, the lighting, the staging, that is the ante to get in the game. That is expected, that is required, and that shouldn't be something that you're necessarily touting as your reason why people should hire you. The thing that wins you the business and wins you the client is the content. It is how you're going to take their messaging and bring that to life for what I refer to as the stakeholders. Who's that audience? Are we in a live event? Are we in a virtual event? Are we in an investor week? Whatever. How are you going to bring that content to life in ways that are meaningful and stick the concepts that you're trying to communicate and the things that are important to you to that audience, right? And creating not just the video and the speeches and the PowerPoints, but just how does everything that you create inside of the content? I would say entertainment. I would say the opening video modules, all of that has to live in support of the content and the message. Otherwise, it just becomes fluff, and people are like, so cool that an elephant and people swinging from the ceilings. Cool. What was the event about? I have no idea, but the
Yeah.
elephant was amazing, right? So how do you tie it back?
There's two things you said there that I want to hit on that I think are really good. One is the term stickiness, right? I like that term because I think I always talk about at an event, how do you extend the life, right?
Right.
So if you're building a trade show booth and you're the brand, how do you extend that to your customers throughout a whole year, throughout a week, throughout a month? Same thing for the event. And that stickiness that I think you're talking about is wrapped into the content, is wrapped into how you engage somebody, right? So the stickiness kind of stays with them. I think it's an excellent point, right? The second piece I like that you said is that excellence in the production and the service, which I think is for most businesses has to happen to be good, to keep business and all that stuff. But the win and really where you generate clients and build a name, what you're saying is in for your side is the creation of the content, right? The way that content moves people. And I think that's really a lot of people can resonate with that no matter which business that you are in, that there's always a next level thing that you're delivering that I think is more intimate to that audience, which is kind of what you described there to me.
100%. And so that's what I was saying is that if you look in terms of like $1 million budget, that content production might be 100,000 or 150,000, right? It's 10 or 15% of your overall budget, but it is so crucial. And that's what you're working with the C-suite. You're working with them, right? And you're helping them craft their message in a more impactful way. A lot of times the C-suite in the past, I mean, it's far more savvy about it now, but in the past, a lot of times executives just didn't care. It was a lot of, this is my message, this we're going to get out. And I had one CEO over a decade ago that whenever he would speak, and it was a rather large conference every year, whenever he'd speak, about 25% of the audience would get up and walk out. And I was like, well, so as we're talking about that this year, why don't we figure out why that is? And then, his initial response was, well, screw those people and blah, blah, blah. They don't want to hear the message. And I'm like, well, okay, so what if we didn't do that? What if we thought about what it was that maybe they took issue with or what they were struggling with or what it is? And well, they're mad about this and they don't like that we did that. And we don't like that we did this and this and this. I'm like, okay, so what if you started your speech by addressing all those things, by addressing the things that you knew that they had an issue with, right? Because if I've got a problem with you, Matt, and there's an unresolved thing between you and me, I don't want to just have a simple conversation with you. And I don't probably really want to hear about you going to the Yankee game or whatever it is, right? Not that I'm a Dodger fan, but just in general, if you start the conversation and go, hey, I really just want to clear the air. I know there's some concerns about this and this. Can we talk those things through? I suddenly now have ears to hear what you have to say. Not to get too sappy, but an open heart to kind of maybe receive some of the things that you say. So I think it's so important. Communication, people don't realize how emotional that communication thing is. And a lot of times I think, well, it's a conference, it's business meeting, it's not supposed to be emotional. We're emotional people. We don't know what we're carrying. We don't know where people are. Something happened in the world. Address those things. Get it on the table. Make people feel like it's a safe space and then dive in.
That makes me think of the elephant in the room, right? And that's either with content or people, right? I talk about it with my sales team all the time. Always, when they bring a deal to the table that we're discussing or throwing around, in my brain, I'm thinking, what's the elephant in the room right now? In the middle of this process, in the middle of this relationship, what is the elephant in the room that you're not saying because it's difficult to put on the table? But you realize that once you do put it on the table, everybody's guard goes down, right? And that, I don't know why it made me think that, but
it's exactly it. What we refer to as the elephant in the room. You got to address that thing because it's so easy, especially in today's corporate climate, for people to just kind of go, well, don't bring that up. Don't bring it up. It's a touchy subject and we don't want to offend. Blah, blah, blah. If you can speak with respect to everybody in the room, right? And not in a way that interrogates people, but interrogates the results of what you're trying to do. I think there's an openness that kind of comes from that.
So this can be a broad question, but give me a broad stroke here. How do you create great content, right? I mean, if you're tasked with either working in marketing at your company or you're with an agency, wherever it is that you sit, that you're looking to create great content, how do you do that? What's the process look like?
Yeah. I don't know how the process actually started for me, but I think the broad stroke answer for me, and we can kind of back up how to get there. But the broad stroke answer for me is, how do I put myself in the seat of the audience? Right. And what does it feel like? Right. And not just what does my chair feel like in this ballroom, but what does it feel like walking into this room? And much to my earlier point, what does it feel like coming to a conference from this company? And I know you just laid off 10% of our workforce. or we're in the middle of a global pandemic. What is the mindset of the people there, and what's going to make them feel receptive to your message? Right. And then what is it that's going to excite them? Sometimes it's like, we're going to get these numbers and we're going to crush it and blah, blah, blah. But what does that mean to me as the worker? Does it mean you're going to kill me with 70-hour work weeks for us to be able to get those numbers so that the share price goes up by, 10%? So always trying to go, who's the audience? Who are
Yeah.
you trying to hit? What are you trying to motivate them to do? And let's back into everything from there, as opposed to, I have this message, I think it's gonna be cool, and this is what I want to say. Right.
That's really good. I think about this from my standpoint is I talk a lot about audience and
Mhm.
always questioning who is the audience there, right? But sometimes that could be like a broad stroke. I think it's a general marketing thing. I do in general think that people miss it, right? But I love that yours to me sort of just went down to the basement of it.
Right.
And I love the questions like, what is their mindset? Like, because if you're just saying who is the audience, you're not really putting yourself in their
Right.
shoes. You're not. You're saying, okay, it's, Jane Doe, she's this or he is that, and this is their age, and you're generalizing them, right? But when you're like what you just said, what's their mindset? And I love the other piece. What would excite them? Because now you're pulling on what you said. We're all subjective creatures to a massive fault, right? So you really understanding who they are, and then you can build things kind of around them, which takes me to messaging at events, right?
Sure.
Whether you're a brand that's speaking one out or whether you're creating your own event, what's your thoughts on crafting really good messaging, crafting really good story?
Right. I think surrounding yourself with really smart people, really creative people is key. And one of the things that we do that you and I have talked about, Matt, is with a product line called Spoken Cinema. And this really addresses kind of what we had just mentioned. Spoken Cinema is this product line that we have where we work with a spoken word artist, Steve Connell, and we do a discovery call with the client. We find out their messaging, find out where they want to go, find out the history of the company, the client, the audience, all that. He writes a piece, and then we create a digital landscape, original scores to when he performs it. It's like he's standing in a movie. But the point of what I'm trying to make here is he has a unique ability, unlike anybody I've ever seen in my entire life, to connect people directly to the heart of what it is they do, to connect the audience to what they do, not what they do, not their physical job that they do day in and day, but what they cause. What is the result of the work that they do? They don't make steering wheels. They create a safe vehicle for moms to pick their kids up from soccer practice, right? It's the bigger purpose of what people do on a day-to-day basis. And what that does in your question about message is it makes the company not the company. It makes the
No.
audience, which is the company that makes up the company in the majority of these conferences, makes them feel seen, makes them feel valued, makes them feel like they're an integral part of the success of what this company is doing, as opposed to just having a report out. So when you're coming to crafting great message, it's again, what's the good and the bad of your story? How are you going to deliver the bad in the context of the good, right? How are you going to be authentic in what you're delivering? Because there's a lot of people out there that just want to tell great stories that aren't authentic stories. And one of my favorite poems that Steve wrote for us has the line in it that says, "A good story doesn't have to be true. It just has to tell truth." And that's
Mm.
the difference, right? Because we can tell stories that aren't necessarily true, but they don't necessarily tell truth either, right? In today's world, today's market, especially the new workforce, I would say people, in their young 20s to their late 30s, there is a desire, a craving, a hunger for authenticity more than anything.
Yeah.
They just don't
Yeah.
want to be BS'd, right? And so your message has to be authentic as well as dynamic, and then using good structure of story to hook them and then bring them back around at the end that you reinforce your message.
Excellent stuff there. Few things here.
Sure.
Michael commented in here, a great book for people who might want to grow their ability to have those difficult or challenging discussions. He's referring to when David and I were talking about the elephant in the room, is a book called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. I can tell you, I've seen Chris Voss speak live. I've heard him on podcasts, his own. It's excellent. And it's absolutely great advice, that book. The book is called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. It's fantastic. He was an FBI hostage negotiator international for years. So he understands human mindset, right? And even in the most challenging or difficult of a situation where you're negotiating lives and people, he understands that the other person, although probably a sociopath on the other end, is still a human being. So he has some really great tactics that he utilizes. So yeah, Michael, it's a great book, and thank you for putting that in there.
Thanks for that.
We then have a question from Ken with the best last name I've seen in quite a minute. He says, as a company and industry, do you think that the behavioral design and sciences that are coming out of CX, EX, and UX are going to become a major part of the content process?
Yeah, definitely is. It's amazing. It's awesome. It's absolutely frightening, right? What's happening, and especially as we start thinking about what AI can represent for us in so many wonderful and horrible ways, right? Yeah. So I'm really, you answer your question is yes, it's gonna have a huge impact on where we're going, and it's trying to figure that out, because we've been talking about this a lot, going, okay, so what are some beneficial ways to use AI, and what are some ways that are scary? And there's some really wonderful things that we can do to really help us accelerate the human connection points at live events through AI on the front end. But there's also just as many terrifying things about that. So all over the place. I don't know, Matt, if you saw this coming up as a DJ. I'm big into music, and I don't know if you saw Timbaland's Instagram post last week. I don't know if you saw
I
this.
did not know.
Yeah. So Timbaland has created his own AI platform that he's been able to sample the tonality, the verbal expression, the intonation of artists that are no longer with us. So this is different than Natalie Cole doing a duet with her deceased father, or somebody doing a duet with Elvis Presley and then taking old footage and putting it together. Timbaland wrote a new song and has Biggie singing it.
Yeah.
Right. Biggie, who's been dead since 96, right? Singing the new words to his new song. And you listen to it and you're like, crap.
Wow.
Yeah, that's, and so what does that mean? That's a adjunct to who we are in the event or experiential and marketing side, but the live performance world. I mean, I was having conversations over the weekend about this. Does it become analogous to a synthesizer in 5 years, where you can just kind of go, okay, give me Whitney Houston, right? And anybody can sing into a microphone and have Whitney Houston come out. That seems to homogenize our world, but it also will drop pricing on things. So it becomes a little bit terrifying.
I think it's a great question from Ken. Like, when you're talking behavioral science, design, all that mixed into one, and then you're talking AI and the direction these things are going, like, the one thought that I had is, like, I mean, I use AI for different things. So you could spit into AI, hey, I'm hosting an event for nurses that are in the beginning of they've only been a nurse for less than 3 years and they work in trauma centers. And you could put everything into them for an event purpose and say, like, how would you theme this event? I mean, you could put all that in it and it will regurgitate and spit out a whole bunch of stuff to you, and it will give you a direction. But I think what's interesting is, yes, I think it will be a big part. I think people will use it to work quicker, work faster, work smarter. But I also think what AI can't do is, at this point in time, it can't be in the room. It can't read the room. It can't read what people are their faces, their demeanors. It can't take that real-time experience and then evolve it. So as much as AI will take place, I think what it then is, it also has you still leaning on the individuals, the people that just know, like you mentioned being a DJ and having DJ, right? Like, a great DJ reads the room. A great DJ doesn't have a set that shows up and just plays music for an hour and a half. They read the room, they change stuff up based on how people feel. So I think huge place for that there, especially in the content world. But at the end of the day, content has to move people, and AI will be behind in understanding how it moves people, whereas a person in the room will be able to understand it real time. But yeah, it's a great.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I have two comments on that. One, I have always said the greatest skill that I learned from being a DJ is the ability to read a room, right? You put a crappy song on, it clears the dance floor, you immediately have to respond. So when you're in the room and you're in a boardroom, you're doing a pitch, you can see when people pick up their phones, start checking their email, doing things, and you're losing that. You know to pivot. So that. But I also wanted, the second thing I wanted to do is I wanted to comment. We did a thing in March called the Go West Experience. It was a 3-day summit that we did out of our studios in Nashville. And one of our vendors from a vendor partner from Event EQ came in, and they were showcasing a new AI platform that they have that actually reads the room. They
Real
put
time.
words in there, and they can see if you're smiling, frowning, looking at your phone,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it tracks it in real time with what is happening on the stage. So you can see what resonates with people and what doesn't resonate
Yep.
with people. You're like, all right,
Yeah.
well,
You're taking the
I'm not,
temperature there. Yeah.
yeah, I'm not saying Skynet's here, man. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it
It's getting there. It's getting close.
might be looking in the neighborhood. I'm just saying.
There's something you touched on earlier, which I think is big when it comes to content, and it's authenticity. As we go back to this, right? I do think authenticity is huge when you're trying to, because with content, you're trying to educate, you're trying to sell, you're trying to convey them to think a certain direction, understand you solve a problem that they may have. Authenticity is big. People don't want to buy stuff from people that are not authentic. They just don't, right? So for me, one thing it makes me think is that for the next 10 years, moving forward, and maybe even longer, 15 years or so, the core buyer for most brands and companies will be millennials and Gen Zs. They will be the buyer.
Yes.
They will be your new buyer for the next 10, 20 years. So understand they do want authenticity. They can whip out their phone in 2 seconds and figure out who you are, your message, what you sell. They can look you up on Glassdoor. They can look you up on your social. They can read reviews. They can go to Reddit. They can figure you out in 2 seconds. So your content and sort of who you are as a brand has to be authentic. I think it was a really good point you brought up, especially where we're going in the future.
100%.
Let's talk experiences a little bit, right?
Sure.
Like a lot of people listening to this are trying to create experiences, whether they're events, they're trade shows, whether they're content activations. Tell me a little bit, like, what are the groundwork for creating good, really quality in-person experiences?
Yeah. Yeah. It goes back to a lot of the same questions. What are you trying to communicate? What do you want people to do? Where do you want to go? What are you trying to connect them to? So we have done really, really fun, I would say, activations, experiences that weren't high dollar, but had huge impact. We've done we've done very high dollar things that we created a huge experience. So like when we're doing a conference and then we're also doing the experiential side of it, it's like, how does everything tie in? What is the experience in the room, outside the room? How is from the moment people step on site? How is everything living in support? How is everything a manifestation of the messaging that you're trying to do? So
Would you give me an example? Sorry to cut you off. Would you give me an example of something like you're saying, like low cost, high impact? Because I think that's something I would say, especially in the trade show event world, where it's like, hey, if you have all the money in the world, I mean, you could be Dreamforce, you could bring Beyonce out on stage, right? I mean, you could do all that, but if you don't, how do you engage? How do you do something meaningful, right? Without huge budgets. So I'd love to hear any ideas, examples, anything like that.
Yeah, one of my favorite ones I love to throw out is activation that we did about 8 or 9 years ago now for Sexy Hair. So Sexy Hair is a hair care product, big red spray cans for hairspray, and I may still use a little gel in my hair, Sexy Hair. But in 2013 and 14, they had a deal with the estate of Marilyn Monroe to use Marilyn's likeness as the face of their brand for a 2-year campaign. And it just so happened that the 60th anniversary of that famous photo of Marilyn getting her skirt blown up during the shooting of the 7-Year Itch, and the 60th anniversary of that photo being taken happened inside of that 2-year window that they had it. So they came to me with an idea, which we elaborated on. And the project, I think all in, including travel, was under 25 grand. So not a high dollar project at all. But what we did is like, how can we let every single person have the opportunity to have their Maryland moment?
Yeah.
And, this was 8, 9 years ago, so people weren't as sensitive to certain things as they are now. But what we had is right at the corner of 59th and Lexington, which is exactly where Marilyn was when she took that photo. Yep. We set up a very low profile stage, looked like it was a subway grate on it, had a high powered fan underneath it. And for 12 hours, we had models up there getting their skirt blown up. And yeah, as it were, and it was right at a subway exit. But anybody that was walking by,
Yeah.
man, woman, could come in, sign a waiver, and go and get their skirt blown up. And, a couple of caveats there. It was in my discussions, I had to have several calls with the estate of Marilyn Monroe to, they're most concerned about what people would be wearing under their skirts, right? Because most people don't know that Marilyn Monroe actually wore 2 pairs of underwear when she was planning to do that shoot. So we settled on booty shorts. And the night before the activation, I was at H&M here in New York City buying 20 pairs of booty shorts from size 0 to 24. And so that anybody that came by would sign a release, go into a dressing room, put the booty shorts on, they'd go up there and get their skirt blown up.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, it was such a simple activation, and it got just millions of views all around the world, and the newspapers and magazines and news outlets picking it up in every corner of the world. It was a really fun activation, but really said, who the brand is, right? Sexy hair. Sexy is for everybody. And Marilyn
Yeah.
Monroe being the ultimate icon of sexiness, and each person having the ability to have their Marilyn moment, I think tied the whole story together.
It's a great example, right? I love it because you're allowing people to relive a moment. You're thinking about the crowd. You're thinking about the aura of the way
Yeah.
people feel in that brand. It's a really, really good example. Tell me a little bit about like audience connection, right? So, we've talked on this a bunch, but I just think when it comes to trade shows, when it comes to events, when it comes to, you've worked in television, right? I mean, you've worked in a lot of areas where you're producing and creating something that an
Mhm,
audience is consuming. So whether
mhm,
you're sitting at your house watching it, whether you are walking up to a trade show booth and recognizing a brand for the first or 10th time, whether you're attending an event as an attendee, brands, producers, people are trying to create an audience connection, which I think at the end of the day, you're trying to get someone to feel a certain way is what I think. But I want to know from you, like, how do you create audience connection? How would you suggest others look into it and
mhm.
kind of reverse engineer their projects?
Yeah, I think there's different ways for different types of connections. So if we're doing something like, trade show wise, right? I am going to sit around and I'm going to want to spitball ideas with a very diverse age group and type of crowd to kind of get what they think is cool, what would be fun, what is different, yet still, run it through the authenticity. Doesn't really jive. Is it fun? Is it real? But if I'm doing something that's more theatrical,
Mhm.
more, people sitting in an audience and I want to create a moment, that's a completely different headspace for me, right? Where I will sit a lot of times alone and live with the music, the content, the visuals, the storyline, and just over and over and over in my head, just kind of envision that moment. So I mentioned before we went live here that I'm getting ready to produce a big holiday thing in Nashville this year. And it's, just something that I'm doing. I'm writing the check for. I just want to do because I just want to do something for the community. Right.
Yeah.
And not necessarily go West thing, but it's something I want to do. And so I'm sitting here with each one of those songs, and in my head, I'm going, okay, what is happening on the stage? What does the lighting look like? What are the visuals that we put behind that? Right. And I know that I'm hitting something when I emotionally try to speak my ideas, or I just think about it, and and it makes me laugh or it makes me tear up or whatever that. And so I mentioned that earlier, just putting myself in the seat of the audience and go, how how would I get there? What would make me laugh, cry, jump to my feet, right? And so when we produce opening moments for corporations, we're always saying that. It's like, what's the net result? In that opening 5 minute or 10 minutes or whatever, what do we want people to do? Do we want them to go, wow, that was really touching and that was really cool? Do we want people to jump to their feet and applaud? Do we want them to be excited and say, I love this company. What is that thing we want them to do? And then how do we build them there, right? In 3 minutes, 5 minutes, or 10 minutes?
You know what it made me think of? I just took my kids to Disney for 3
Mm,
days. And I'm not typically a big roller coaster person, but there's a new ride at Disney from that movie Tron, if you remember it with the motorcycles.
yeah.
The ride is incredible. I mean, I've ridden a lot of roller coasters, a lot of rides with my kids and different things like that. When I was on this Tron ride, I felt like a freaking superhero on this thing. I did. It was unbelievable. The
Wow.
way it's the process getting into it, the immersiveness, the way they position you in like a motorbike almost, like this futuristic motorbike, and then they shoot you out of this flat cannon. It's like you're in the bat cave and you're coming
Right.
ripping out and then up and out. It's the way it made me feel though. I felt, I mean, as a 37-year-old man, I felt like a kid. I got off that ride. I mean, I couldn't shut up about it. I still can't shut up about it. It was incredible. It made me feel different than any other ride had made me feel. I did Space Mountain. It was thrilling. It was fun. It's a
Right.
roller coaster. That made me feel like a kid. That made me feel like a superhero. It was
That's awesome.
amazing. Yeah.
That's
Talk to me about, for event marketing specifically, brands that are utilizing event marketing as a channel to drive sales, build loyalty, build brand awareness, all the things that people say they're doing it for. What do you think brands really want to accomplish by being face to face, by putting on events, by putting, on trade shows, activations where clients are, running their own events? Like, what, in your experience, what do you think brands really want out of event marketing and that channel?
sales.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
Right.
I know.
Yeah. Ultimately, sales.
Yeah.
But I think brand loyalty. I think really, I mean, yeah, yes, sales, yes, investor ROI and shareholder price going up. Yes, all of that. But it's bigger than a sale one time. It's about building goodwill for the brand in a way that people are like, I love that brand, And I tell you, I mean, we're so fortunate that we have Duncan as one of our clients, and that brand, that people love that brand. It is so different than
Hmm.
Starbucks, right? People really like Starbucks, and people that are maybe fans of Starbucks and will go and make sure they get their Starbucks every day. But the fanatical nature, and maybe it's because they're a Boston-based company, and that's in the
Yeah.
DNA of Boston, but the fanatical nature in which people love that brand,
Hmm.
even if on occasion they get their drink wrong or their order wrong or whatever, the brand love never wavers for somebody like that. And there's that. I think that's really what so many of these brands are really chasing is, how do we build brand loyalty? How do we build brand love? And you look at somebody like Duncan, which has really been authentically and organically, that love has just grown from their client base, right? And you know, just think about,
How do you think How do you think a company builds that? I mean, I'm from the Northeast. I know exactly what you're saying. I think there's some people that wouldn't understand. Like everybody loves what you're saying is spot on. Like the way people feel about Dunkin' Donuts is unbelievable in
right,
some parts of the country. It's actually weird in my opinion
right.
because I don't think it's that great. And I grew up in the Northeast. But anyway, how did they build that? One, right? And then how, for a new company, a bigger brand on the rise, how do they use events to build that loyalty, to build what I view as this feeling you have towards a brand, right? Like if I said, David, Nike, you could tell me what you feel, what you think, right? Like, we work with Publix, huge grocery store in the Southeast. And when
Yep.
you talk to people and you ask them about Publix, get a lot of the same answers about what they feel about them. So you have to build this feeling. How do they do that?
Yes, I think it's meeting your audience where they are. And I think a lot of these brands started as something small and local. You think about how Nike
Mhm.
started as small and local, and was hyper focused on certain athletes and creating something that was different and meeting people where they're at. And I think that is the biggest challenge with a lot of companies today, because companies that started 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago, I think they had no idea of the global juggernauts that they were going to become, right?
Yeah.
Now you have
Yeah.
brands starting in the last 10, 15 years that, you know, day one is how do we become a global juggernaut, right? You can't be all things to all people. And so you're going to have, people that you resonate with over here that what you did doesn't resonate over there. And the world has become so polarizing now it's much harder for a brand to win that sort of favor. So you think about like In-N-Out Burger, right? I was in Southern California for 45 years, and In-N-Out Burger is like, it's part of that Southern California culture.
It's culture. It is. Yeah.
Yeah, and they just moved their headquarters to Nashville, and they're opening a store there in 25. But I noticed, the article, it said Tennessee will become the 8th state to have In-N-Out Burger. And I'm thinking, wow, yeah, because I was in California, my
Yeah.
perception of In-N-Out Burger was that they were this global juggernaut. Everybody had the same love
Not at all.
that SoCal had for them, right?
Mhm.
But they've had an authentic groundswell, and I think they'll continue to do well because they built out that fan base.
Mhm.
But it's really, really hard when you're a new product going to market in 50 states or in 20 countries or whatever, and you're trying to have that same sort of authentic connection with a community when your community is a country or a globe.
Yeah. You know what I like? So this is bringing back to us talking originally about brands, about being authentic. I love that you use that term, right? And we were talking about, millennials and Gen Z being the buyers, and, now with the technology in their hand, they can sniff anything out. But what it makes me think too is like, as a brand, being authentic to me is like, do you have a mission? Do you have a purpose? Is there a reason? Is it just, you just love burgers so much, right? Like
Right.
whatever it may be, it makes me think about like when we go through our process with our clients, one of our big pieces, one of our check boxes is just this box. It's brand. It's understanding, who are you really? Who are you as a brand, right? Like, don't
Right.
tell me what you do. I want to know who you are. What do you stand for? What do you bleed? What are you all about as a brand? And I think a lot of what we're hovering around is like, you have to understand all these things. And then you're then giving them to somebody like yourself or whoever and saying, hey, how do we convey this? We want to convey this consistently. And then you're conveying it through all different types of mediums, essentially.
Sure. Yeah, and I think right now, a lot of brands have a purpose-driven situation, whether they necessarily believe it or whether it's for marketing
Yeah.
purposes. I think
Yeah.
a lot of people do purpose-driven things just because it's in fashion, and then you have people that do purpose-driven things that are in fashion with some and not with other. I mean, Chick-fil-A is a great place,
Yep.
right? A great example of that, right? They are who they are. They work 6 days a week. They take the Sabbath off on Sundays,
Mhm.
and they have a huge evangelical base of people that support that. Some of the other things
Yeah.
that they stand for is, it being on a conservative right platform probably repel some potential client, customers as well,
Mhm.
but they're
Yeah.
authentic to who they are, right? So
Yes.
they've been able to grow their base the way they grew their base. So I think that's really it. It's I think the biggest challenge people get is they try to cast too big of a net, and that net
Mm.
just reeks of inauthenticity.
Yeah. And I like what you said about the purpose is like, where I think particularly when you're working with a brand or talking to a brand is like, it's not always just about your purpose or your mission or something where for every 20 pairs of socks, you donate 3 or something. It's not
Right.
just that. It's like, who are you at your core as a business? It's like asking a person like, who are you deep down? What are you really all about? What do you believe? And it's like, as a business, you have to establish what that is. Tell me, so we're talking about content, we're talking about mediums and getting it out to people and, conveying narrative and messaging and how to create it. And it's been a really good discussion about that. You have a product called Spoken Cinema,
Mhm.
right? Which is, I mean, I looked into it. You've touched on it a little bit at the beginning of this.
Right.
For anybody listening, right? Go, just go to Dave, go to Go West Creative. You can check out the Spoken Cinema, but walk us through this a little bit because I think it kind of brings everything together of what we're talking. It's a very cool product. It's a very good medium avenue way of doing it. Tell us a little bit about it, please.
Yeah. Yeah, so I hit a little bit on it, so again, so we'll do these discovery calls. Steve Connell is, again, I think he's the greatest spoken word artist. I don't think anybody has his heart, his ability to communicate who people are, and his style, right? And so, like, so many spoken word artists are very sing-songy in their delivery, and that's not his deal. But anyway, so it's this combination. Spoken cinema is a combination of the spoken word custom spoken word piece that Steve creates for a client that we then create a whole digital landscape and this, original cinematic score. So again, so as he stands in front on the stage and, behind him is a screen that's, 50 to 200 feet wide, and every word that comes out of his mouth is coming to life as he speaks it in real time. And you have the music swelling and it becomes this emotional, visceral thing, like he's standing in a movie and you're all experiencing it together. It has become what we refer to as kind of as our lightning in a bottle, because really nobody else has anything like this. And we're able to, we do about 20 original pieces a year. So in the last decade, about 250 pieces that we've done together, and sometimes for our clients, sometimes for other people's clients. But it's such a powerful thing. And what you had mentioned about having a life after, right? So a lot of times Steve will open a conference with the piece. Sometimes he'll close it, if it's a charitable event, it's perfect to do right before the ask. But what our clients have started doing is, hey, we know we're going to have Steve open the piece. Can we have Steve write a 30-second invitation to come to the conference, film that in studio, and that becomes a digital invitation that goes out 90 days beforehand? Or, when they get into their hotel room, it's Steve on the TV screen, right, welcoming it. And what that does is it's a new, interesting way to invite people, but also creates an immediate recognition when Steve walks out on stage at the top of the conference and people have never seen it before, right? But and they get it, and there's an immediate connection. And then the important thing on message to carry that through, because a lot of times CEOs or presidents or whoever's coming out first, whoever's coming out right after Steve, a lot of times the thing is, I don't want to follow him, right? He's going to get a standing ovation, which he always does. And then I'm going to come out and deliver the results. And so what we always talk to our clients about is like, all right, so you have the piece 4 weeks before, pull out the lines from Steve's poem that make the most sense to what you're going to deliver, and go, you hear what Steve said? He said blah, 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 right? And some of that goodwill from what he did now gets, connected in that connected red thread gets pulled into their piece, right? And so it's just a way to, keep that message going. And then also, we've had really good fortune to then take some of those lines and, it goes out and on the front of the marketing materials or whatever, or t-shirts or whatever. So it just kind of becomes a message that carries on, much further past the event.
It sounds to me like, I feel like a lot of times just from events, being a marketer myself and someone that truly enjoys it, it's like people are looking a way to convey. They're looking for a way, whether it's visual, audio, smell, all the senses, garner attention, capture it, right? And kind of move that. This is an excellent way to sort of like captivate an audience and deliver a message all at the same time. So I would encourage anybody to go take a look and check out. I think Ish put it in the chat for you all. David, it has been a blast talking to you. You have awesome career, cool company. It's been fun. I have kind of a closing question, and I think this would be a good one for you. What would be advice to your younger self?
Stop wasting so much time trying to impress people, right? I feel like I wasted a lot of time and made a lot of mistakes early on in business, trying to look bigger, sound bigger, seem more successful than I really was, so people would like me. And it's all bullshit. I find the greatest connections, the greatest success I've had is when I've been real about our failures and our ability to overcome and our tenacity to overcome, as opposed to any major success or any big show that we've ever done.
It's an authentic answer, my friend. That was really good. I appreciate it. David, how can people find you? How can people find Go West Creative?
Sure. We're simple. We're super lucky. We have a 4-letter web address, gwcg.com. That's Go West Creative Group, gwcg.com. You can also go directly to spokencinema.com. You can find me on Instagram at DigiWest, DIGIWEST on Instagram. Love to chat with you guys.
David, good stuff, man. I've had a pleasure talking to you twice now. Good having you on the show. Good luck in New York these next couple of days. What you got going on there? Good luck with your the special you're doing out in Nashville, the one you're producing.
Yep. Thank you so much.
And thanks for being here, man. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you, everybody, for showing up as always. Thank you.